A couple of things just occurred to me. And one is that Tennessee should be pretty good at linebacker. When we get into that, also this day in Tennessee sports history coming up. Sports treasures carrying over 5 million sports treasures and so much more. Follow on Facebook for the best sports memorabilia daily updates. Sports Treasures TN on Facebook. Sports Treasures TN on Facebook. Let's get into it. Off the Hook Sports with Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. Caleb, how good can Tennessee's linebackers be this year?
This is a position that is probably the most unknown, but the most loaded with possibilities of being great. And there's a reason for that, because there are two key players that we have to mention, obviously. The first is the guy who's returning for his 7th year of eligibility, Keenan Pili, who played just one game last year and is kind of the glue of the defense, seems like a leader, kind of the type of guy you want on your team, going to be the guy that holds everybody together. Then there's the rare talent guy that can be the explosive player. And that player is Arion Carter. And both of them we're expecting big things from this year. Now, obviously, there's a new linebackers coach in William Ing, who I think is better than Brian Jean-Marie, honestly. So that even adds to this.
Let me stop you. Why do you think that?
He just is more proven. And there was not a lot of great linebacker development under Brian Jean-Marie. Jeremy Banks, a couple of years ago, never learned how to play in coverage as a middle linebacker, and they never developed a replacement behind Keenan Pili last year. I think Elijah Herring was the wrong choice at middle linebacker. Now, I get it. You know, if you cover teams long enough, you learn why someone is starting over somebody else because you see that somebody else play and you're like, oh, that's why this other bad player was starting. I still think they could have found somebody else. They could have moved Aaron Beasley back over to middle linebacker if they needed to last year. And so I think Jean-Marie did not manage the rotation properly. And so I think that this year you have some freshmen from the 2023 class that are a lot more experienced now, but you have rare talent in Arion Carter. You have experienced leadership in Keenan Pili, and you have a more proven linebackers coach in William Ing.
I think Arion Carter can be really special. I think he can be really special. I think he was, people I've talked to, banged up a little bit last year, and we don't get any injury information from Josh Heupel, and that's the way he runs his program, and a lot of people do that nowadays, so I'm not incredibly surprised. But a lot of people are talking about Keenan Pili, and I think Arion Carter is not only the emerging star on Tennessee's linebacker core, but Tennessee's defense, of Tennessee's football team, and even possibly of the SEC. I think he's that good, going slightly outside of the position with edge rushers now and how we talk about it. I mean, James Pierce is a playmaker. There's no question. I think Arion Carter can be of that ilk as far as a playmaker. Not the same, not quite as good, Caleb, because I think Pierce is special. But I think he can be in the category of elite playmaker, Arion Carter.
Yes, which would make him exactly what we expected him to be when he first committed a year ago. Look, we're talking about Boo Carter being a starter immediately and being we're giving freshman All-American vibes to Boo Carter. That's kind of what we had expected out of Arion Carter going into last year, isn't it? And we never really got it.
Completely thought that.
Yeah. And so I agree. We're talking about a superstar and then obviously a potential superstar. And that's a perfect combination. The leader at middle linebacker in Keenan Pili and then the elite playmaker in Arion Carter. You can have a deadly combo with those two guys, better than you've had in a long time. And that's why, guys, by the way, when people were asking, it's why I'm so high. It's a part of why I'm so high on Tennessee. Now, a few other guys, I mean, you've got depth here. You've got Jeremiah Tellender, who, by the way, they should have been starting over Elijah Herring at middle linebacker, as we found out down the stretch, quite honestly. And I want to be clear. I'm not trying to knock Elijah Herring. I think he did everything he possibly could. I just think he was physically limited from an athletic standpoint.
I agree. According to Josh Ward, who was nice enough to write up the linebackers for us, we certainly appreciate what he does for us. Tennessee has a new beginning of linebacker with Ing's arrival and the departure of Aaron Beasley. How much do they miss Aaron Beasley, if at all?
If Arion Carter does what he's supposed to do, they aren't going to miss him at all. And I say that with no disrespect to Aaron Beasley, but yeah, there. It's like when they lost Marcus Nash. It's like when they lost Joey Kent and then had Marcus Nash. No disrespect to Joey Kent, but Peyton Manning didn't miss him in 1997. So
no. I agree with that, Caleb. I think that, and it's not a shot at Beasley. Now, had Beasley been able to play Sam, had he been able to play outside linebacker as much as he should have, then maybe that's different. He was not a middle linebacker. I think both of us thought he was pretty good there for a while before they had us sliding back to the middle at times, at least getting better. And I mean no disrespect to Beasley either, but I'm just going to tell you that athletically, Arion Carter, from what I've been told, is at a whole different level.
Yes. And by the way, we have to put, because I'm hearing people comment, I do believe Elijah Herring led the team in tackles, but I think Dave could tell you more than I could. That is the most unnecessary stat for judging linebackers in football, isn't it? Tackles. And so it's, I think, I agree. I think Carter could be a star. Now, again, I want to mention, even if he's not, though, the depth is there. We just mentioned Jeremiah Tellender, Jalen Smith, Caleb Perry is now going to be a junior. He should be very good. And then you got 2 4-stars committed in Jordan Burns out of Atlanta and Edwin Spielman out of Nashville. And so I think between those, you should have enough options now to work with. Now, obviously, Josh Heupel, I think at every position, doesn't like to go too deep. I think he prefers keeping the guys in a regular rotation. But I think this is going to make things interesting, how that all works.
And then Keenan Pili. Tennessee has been hit or miss like every team in the portal, but Pili was a big, big hit, not just from a play standpoint, but also from a leadership standpoint. I can't tell you how many times I've been told that he is a heck of a leader. That's pretty impressive for a guy who transferred, and Caleb, a guy who got banged up pretty early. For him to be considered a leader already, that's a little stunning to me.
Yeah, it's huge. It speaks a lot to his character and the type of defensive player he can be. And again, we were hearing a lot about this last year before he got hurt. That's why I say this linebacker unit is, based on talk, should be elite. Is that fair to say? There's a lot of talk about this linebacker unit that suggests it's elite, but we haven't seen it yet. But Keenan Pili, you're right. We see, if he's anything that we thought he was going to be going into last year, and if Arion Carter is anything that we thought he was going to be eventually, you're talking about a heck of a tandem, and you're not going to miss who you lost last year.
Yep. And with Simmons, I think there is a disagreement on the message board. He still is around the football. I don't think anybody's knocking him for that, correct?
You mean Herring?
Herring. Excuse me.
No, Herring is around the football, and actually Herring takes proper angles. He's a smart player, and he's a hard worker, and his motor never stops. He just doesn't have a lot of lateral quickness, and that's kind of a big thing you need to play middle linebacker.
Can I be honest with you about Herring? I think that guy's a defensive end. I thought physically that he should play defensive end. I think it's because they're so loaded at that position that they haven't moved him. But is he not a classic case of a guy that under the Philip Fulmer regime, they would have moved him to defensive end, just like they moved everybody up to be faster, right?
I think Herring is too much of a tweener. I like him. I think he's too much of a tweener.
Well, we haven't seen him in, so we don't really know. But
we don't really know.
You might be right.
Yeah, he may be one of those guys. He's not strong enough to play in. He's not fast enough to play linebacker. And quite honestly, Dave, he may not be fast enough to play end. I mean, you want your ends to be really quick off the snap, right?
See, I don't have a problem with his straight ahead quickness. You mentioned the lateral. I'm going to disagree with you there. I think he would be really good at end portions of the program. Brought to you by our good friends at Ray Varner Ford. We mentioned them. Selection, best prices, hometown customer service right there in Clinton, Tennessee. Worth the drive. RayVarnerFord.com. RayVarnerFord.com. So anybody else out there in Tennessee's linebacking core that you think could have a major impact? Now, nowadays, strong safety slash linebacker. Essentially, they've replaced it with a nickel. I know this is going outside the position, but I hate just talking about two linebackers. The
Yeah,
guy
I'm
at
listening to
strong
you.
safety. Yeah, I mean, the guy at strong safety is kind of a pseudo linebacker, right?
Yes, very much so.
Okay.
But
So
again,
who would you have it there?
well, you still got some other guys behind these players who had a lot of highly touted potential. We already mentioned Elijah Herring. I mentioned Jeremiah Tellender, who started a lot in place of Herring last year. There's still Jalen Smith, who's now a redshirt freshman who has a lot of potential. Caleb Perry, we've heard a lot about Caleb Perry over the last couple of years. So, and then again, there are two commitments at the position this year. Like I said, Edwin Spillman out of Nashville and Jordan Burns out of Atlanta, both 6'2", 215 to 220 ish. They'll probably have to put on a little bit of weight, but I think either of them could back up Keenan Pili at middle linebacker. So Tennessee's got options this year, put it that way. And
Yep.
I think they'll all be there in the spring.
Well, I think this is actually a time to take it really easy on Arion Carter and Keenan Pili. So if both coming off of seasons with injuries, I don't think Arion Carter, you mentioned guys get held out of spring. I don't think he's going to be the topic of conversation a lot because I think he will be limited. Of those guys that'll be limited, I would think it would be Pili and I would think it would be Carter. Limited and spring practice go hand in hand, Caleb. That doesn't mean that you're hurt. That doesn't mean you're going to miss the season. That's just part of spring practice. You're not going to put a guy out there if there's any risk of injury or re-injuring, especially with Keenan Pili, who I believe is almost as old as me. And you don't want to put him out there, nor do you want to put Arion Carter, a guy who's already flashed his potential.
I totally agree. I totally agree with you on all of that.